I knew the exact moment my career at Harrison Logistics was dead on the table. It wasn't when the quarterly projections dipped, and it wasn't when my late husband's portrait was moved from the lobby to the break room hallway next to the fire extinguisher. She had that specific kind of MBA energy, the kind that uses words like synergy and disruptive because they don't know how to actually negotiate a fuel surcharge with a union rep in Detroit. I sat at the far end of the mahogany table, nursing a coffee that tasted like battery acid and resignation. Know where the bodies are buried because I'm the one who drafted the liability waivers for the shovels. If you're enjoying this train wreck of corporate hubris and want to see a girl boss get absolutely dismantled by fine print, go ahead and hit subscribe and drop a like. Chloe, my lovely daughter-in-law and newly appointed chief operating officer, didn't look at me. She looked through me, was busy projecting a slide deck that was 9% stock photos of diverse people shaking hands and 10% actual data, which happened to be wrong. We haul gravel and auto parts, Chloe. We don't need an app. The legacy infrastructure, Chloe said, her eyes finally landing on me like a predator spotting a wounded gazelle, is holding us back. We have too many redundancies in the back office. The room went quiet. The other department heads, men my husband Richard had hired, men I had bailed out of compliance nightmares more times than I could count, stared at their notepads. They knew legacy infrastructure was code for Elena. They knew paperweight meant the woman who actually read the contracts before signing them. I just took a slow sip of that terrible coffee. Interesting perspective, Chloe, I said, my voice level. But please tell me more about the app. Chloe's smile didn't falter, but her eyes hardened. We appreciate the history, Elena. Truly. But Richard is gone, and this company needs to evolve. I think you and I need a special block of time. Alignment, that's corporate for get your box ready. It wasn't just the disrespect, it was the erasure. I wasn't just Richard's widow. I was the one who negotiated the merger with the private equity ghouls 3 years ago when cash flow was so tight we were paying vendors in promises. Was the one who kept the lights on. While Chloe was busy curating her Instagram feed to look like a working mom, despite having 2 nanas and a personal assistant for her dog, the meeting dragged on for another hour of buzzword bingo. Holistic approach, drill down, low-hanging fruit. I watched the way the CFO, Dave, wouldn't make eye contact with me. I watched the way the HR director, spineless woman named Susan, who I had personally mentored, was furiously typing on her phone under the table. This wasn't a consultation. It was a coronation, and I was the old regime waiting for the guillotine. She smelled like expensive vanilla and unearned confidence. She placed a hand on my shoulder. I know this is hard, Elena, she whispered loud enough for the lingering executives to hear. Change is scary at your age, but we have to think about the shareholders. Trim the fat. I stood up, smoothing the skirt of my navy suit. I am 45 years old. I agree, Chloe, I said, offering her a smile that didn't reach my eyes, a mirror image of her own plastic pleasantry. The shareholders deserve value. I look forward to our chat. I walked out of that conference room with my head high, the sound of her stilettos clicking behind me, like a countdown clock. Thought I was just the grieving widow holding onto a ghost job. She didn't know that I wasn't just an employee, and she had no idea that I had installed a trap door. I went back to my office, the corner office that used to be Richard's, the one Chloe had already instructed maintenance to measure for structural updates. And I closed the door. I didn't panic. I sat down at my desk, locked the bottom drawer, and pulled out a single red folder. It wasn't a plea for mercy. It was a document I had drafted 3 years ago during the Evergreen acquisition panic, when the board was terrified of a hostile takeover and begged me to secure the loyalty of the executive team. Too busy hyperventilating about stock prices. I opened the folder to page 14, just legal text in 11-point Times New Roman. But to me, it looked like poetry. Chloe wanted to trim the fat, she wanted to talk about alignment, but first, I needed to let her dig the hole a little deeper. I needed her to feel safe. I turned to my computer and saw the first email from HR. Subject, urgent, the game was on. The email from Susan in HR was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive corporate violence. The body of the email was sickeningly sweet. Hi, Elena. Sign and return by EOD. Thanks. I didn't even reply immediately. Instead, I hit print. I stood there watching the paper stack up, feeling the eyes of the junior analysts on me. The office atmosphere had shifted overnight. People I had hired, people whose baby showers I had organized, were suddenly fascinated by their spreadsheets. When I walked by, they could smell the blood in the water. It was worse than I thought. It wasn't just housekeeping. Clause several 2, renegotiation of title. Oh, several .1, revocation of seniority bonuses. Chloe had written this, or rather she had paid some overpriced external consultant to write it, specifically to target me. It was a bear trap painted to look like a welcome mat. I annotated the margins with case law citations. I spent 3 hours dissecting her vision until the document looked like it had been bleeding. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of a marked-up draft. I was going to give them silence. All hands meeting in the warehouse. Attendance mandatory. The air changed as soon as you crossed the threshold from the carpeted offices to the concrete floor. It smelled of diesel, dust, and cardboard. These were the guys who actually moved the freight. They looked tired. Chloe stood on a makeshift stage made of wooden pallets, holding a microphone like she was performing a stand-up special. She had swapped the stilettos for pristine white sneakers, a calculated attempt to look down to earth that only made her look more like a tourist in her own business. Who's pumped about Q3? Silence. A forklift beeped in the distance. Change is tough, she continued, undeterred by the total lack of enthusiasm. We are streamlining. We're introducing a new app that tracks your breaks to the second, ensuring maximum efficiency. A murmur of discontent rippled through the crowd. That wasn't efficiency, that was prison rules. Hank used to come to Richard's backyard barbecues. He caught my eye. He knew. Then Chloe dropped the hammer. Here is the new organizational chart for the Midwest region. The chart popped up. At the top in a giant gold box was Chloe's COO. Below her, a clutter of new titles like VP of Synergy and Director of First Impressions. It wasn't there. I looked closer. The breath left my lungs. She hadn't just fired me. She had publicly ghosted me. I felt the heat rise up my neck, could feel the eyes of the warehouse crew shifting toward me. Some looked confused, others embarrassed. She was too busy pointing at the gold box with her name in it. This structure, she chirped, allows for rapid decision-making without getting bogged down in historical bottlenecks. That was me. I didn't storm the stage. I did something that scared them more. I took out my phone, snapped a high-resolution photo of the screen, and then turned around and walked out. I needed to see if the digital eraser matched the physical reality. Sure enough, the new org charts were already being taped up. I walked back to my office and started packing. Not everything, just the personal things. A crystal paperweight the team gave me for my 10th anniversary, my ergonomic mouse. She held a clipboard against her chest like a shield. "Elena," she squeaked. "Did you get my email?" I didn't look up from the box I was filling. We really need that signed today. Chloe wants to finalize the payroll transition. I'm sure she does, but I have some concerns about the legality of Clause 15. I'll need my lawyer to review it before I sign anything. Elena, we're family. We don't need lawyers. Chloe just put me in a gray box titled Interim in front of 20 people. Susan, the family reunion is over. She stammered. If you don't sign, Chloe might have to take other steps. Tell Chloe to take all the steps she wants. Susan fled, a frantic little messenger running back to the Queen. They thought I was packing to leave. I wasn't moving out. I was digging inside. It was time to retrieve the weapon. The next morning, silence was deafening. No meetings, no reminders, just white space. I tried to log into the logistics dashboard, the system I use to track global freight movements and spot contractual liabilities. Error 4003, access denied. They were scrubbing me. Was the digital equivalent of changing the locks while you're still in the house. It was amateurish, and it was exactly what I expected from Chloe. She thought my power came from my ability to see where the trucks were. She was wrong. It came from the foundation. I opened the folder on my local drive labeled Personal, probably because it was too busy figuring out how to install Chloe's new productivity monitoring software. I navigated through a series of nested folders. 3 years ago, a predatory equity firm tried to gut us. They wanted to strip the assets, sell the fleet, and lease back the warehouses. Board was in a panic, ready to sell us out for pennies just to save their own golden parachutes. I stepped inside. I structured the executive contracts to make firing us so expensive that the acquisition would lose its ROI. To get the board to agree to stay and fight, I had to offer them protection. It was designed to protect them from the raiders, but I also wrote one for myself. I found the file Demiller Agreement Amended 2021 executed PDF. It scanned onto the screen. The legal text, dense and comforting. Involuntary termination and change of control. The language was precise, fueled by adrenaline and fear for my husband's legacy. In the event of involuntary termination, without documented cause, as defined in Section 9, following a significant restructuring or change in executive leadership, the employee shall be entitled to an immediate transfer of equity equivalent to 10% of the company's total valuation at the time of termination to be vested immediately. At the time, the board signed it because they were terrified of being fired by the raiders. They viewed me as a fixture as permanent as the building itself. Chloe certainly didn't know it existed, was too busy picking out curtains for her new office to read the dusty contracts in the legal vault. I checked the digital signature. I saved a copy to my phone. I saved another copy to a USB drive attached to my keychain. Then I did something subtle. I went to the company's internal investor portal, which miraculously I still had access to because it was on a separate server from the operations dashboard. I didn't change any data. I just verified my contact information and linked my personal email as a secondary contact for equity notifications. My office door opened without a knock. It was the IT guy, kid named Tyler, who looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. Hey, Elena, Tyler mumbled, staring at his shoes. Hello, Tyler. Chloe, the COO's office said we need to cycle your hardware. Security updates. I see, I said, leaning back in my chair. Does this loner have access to the server? I smiled at him. It was a genuine smile this time. He was just a pawn. It's okay, Tyler. I unplugged my high-end workstation, the one with the dual monitors and the processing power to run complex logistical simulations. I handed it over. There's a lot of history on that hard drive, swapped it for the junk laptop, and practically ran out of the room. I opened the Chromebook. The screen was dim. It was an insult, a calculated humiliation designed to make me quit. I needed them to fire me. I needed the involuntary termination. If I quit, I got nothing but a pat on the back. I needed Chloe to pull the trigger. I was a ghost in the machine now. No access, no power, no voice. My phone buzzed. A text from Chloe. We need to have that chat. Now, this was it. Chloe's office was a fishbowl. Literally, she had replaced the frosted privacy glass with clear floor-to-ceiling panes because she believed in radical transparency, which in practice meant she wanted everyone to see her being important. I walked in with nothing but my phone and a small clutch purse. No notepad, no pen. I needed to make history. Chloe was sitting behind a desk that was comically large, a slab of white marble that looked like a sacrificial altar. She gestured vaguely at a low-slung, comfortable modernist chair opposite her. Elena, she said, her voice dripping with that patronizing softness people use on toddlers and the elderly. Close the door, would you? I closed the glass door. I could see the heads of the accounting department turning toward us. We were on display, she asked, tilting her head. I know the org chart changes were abrupt. I'm just curious about the operational logic. Removing the contracts director in the middle of a vendor renegotiation cycle seems risky, she sighed. A long theatrical exhalation. You're thinking about the weeds. I'm thinking about the ecosystem. We just don't need the manual oversight anymore. A-driven compliance, I repeated. Chloe's smile tightened. We're restructuring, Elena. We need to be leaner and frankly. She leaned forward, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. I think you've been carrying Richard's ghost for too long. It's time for you to go rest. Go to Tuscany. Condescension was so thick I could taste it. So, this is a termination, I stated flatly. We prefer transition, she corrected. Well, yes, but we've prepared a generous severance package. 2 weeks of pay for every year of service. I kept my face completely neutral. Inside, my heart was hammering against my ribs. I needed her to say the words. Chloe, I said softly, forcing a look of vulnerability. Is this because of performance? Did I do something wrong? Chloe laughed. It was a light, dismissive sound. Elena, you're a workhorse. Everyone knows it. It's purely structural. We just want to go in a different direction. No black marks on your record, just a clean break. So the official documentation will state termination. Without cause, I pressed. I've already instructed HR restructuring due to redundancy. No cause. I appreciate that, I said. Could you put that in the separation letter, just so I have peace of mind? I have it right here. Just sign the acknowledgement and we can process your check today. There it was. Notice of separation. Employment is terminated effective immediately due to corporate restructuring. Paragraph 2. I looked at the paper. It was the key to the kingdom. I said, looking up. I need to take this home and review it. Chloe rolled her eyes just a fraction. Elena, it's standard boilerplate. I understand, I said, but I acknowledge that I have been terminated. Yes, effective immediately. You can hand over your badge to security on the way out. I didn't take the pen. I took the folder, I said. You've been very clear. It's for the best, Elena. You'll see. You're going to be so much happier not worrying about this place. She was already checking her phone, dismissing me as a problem solved. She looked like a queen on a throne, unaware that the floor beneath her had just dissolved. I think things are going to be very different now. Walked out of the glass box. The entire office was watching. I walked straight to the elevator, pressed the button, and descended to the lobby. I handed my badge to the security guard, old mister. He looked sad. I'm sorry, missus, it ain't right. Don't worry, Mr. Henderson, I said, patting his hand. It's about to get interesting. I walked out into the parking lot, sat in my car and pulled out my phone. Didn't cry, I opened my email app. It was time to drop the bomb. The engine was off. The silence was absolute, a stark contrast to the noise in my head. I took a picture of the document, specifically the paragraph stating termination, not for cause, and Chloe's sprawling, arrogant signature at the bottom. Then opened my email client. It was sitting in my drafts folder waiting for this specific moment to Corporate Secretary Board of Directors. All General Counsel. CC Chloe Harrison Coup Subject Notice of Severance Clause. Activation. Equity Terms Section 12. C. Lena Harrison. I attached the PDF of my 2021 employment agreement. I attached the photo of today's separation notice. I typed the final body of the email. Dear board members and council, as of 2:30 p.m. today, I have been involuntarily terminated from my position as Director of Contracts and Compliance without cause as documented in the attached notice of separation signed by COO Chloe Harrison. Please consider this formal notice that I am exercising my right to the immediate transfer of a 10% equity stake in Harrison Logistics based on the most recent valuation. Furthermore, per the agreement, I am immediately assuming my position as a voting shareholder on the board of directors. Regards, Elena Harrison, shareholder. My thumb hovered over the send button. I thought about how much he loved this company. He built it with sweat and handshakes, but he also hated incompetence. He hated arrogance. Sorry, Richard, I whispered. But she started it. I pressed send. I started the car. I didn't look back at the gray concrete building. Drove to a small bakery about 5 minutes away, a place I used to go when the stress of the job got too high. I ordered a chai latte and a lemon tart. It took exactly 14 minutes. My phone rang. It was William, the chairman of the board. William was 70 years old, a man who feared lawsuits more than death. Is this real? Hello, William. It was delicious. Is what real? We just got it. The lawyers are looking at it now. You signed it yourself. Remember the Evergreen acquisition? You were very adamant that everyone be protected. I remember protecting the so-white. I didn't know you wrote one for yourself. I was the interim strategy lead at the time. I wasn't going to leave myself out in the cold. I could hear papers shuffling on his end. Does Chloe know? He whispered. But knowing Chloe, she probably hasn't checked her email since she fired me. She's likely celebrating trimming the fat. That's a controlling block when combined with the family trust. That gives you significant leverage. A permanent one. What do you want? Do you want a settlement? We can discuss a cash buyout. I want to fix the company. Chloe is driving it off a cliff. There was a long silence. Chloe isn't going to like this. She isn't. But she should have read the paperwork. I hung up. A notification from LinkedIn popped up. Chloe had posted an update. Sometimes you have to say goodbye to the past to embrace the future. Leadership growth girl boss. It was too perfect. I opened my own profile. I just updated my headline from Director of Contracts and Compliance at Harrison Logistics to voting shareholder and board member at Harrison Logistics. I put the phone down. I felt awake. I felt alive. The war was over. The occupation had begun. I went to the dry cleaners. I picked up my good Navy suit, the one I wore to closings, one that made me look like a jagged rock in a stream of soft water. By the time I got home, my phone was melting down. Several missed calls. I didn't answer Chloe. I let her scream into the void. The Illinois evening was cool. I listened to the voicemails. Legal is saying, "Look, call me back. This is ridiculous." Chloe Several, 45 p.m. Elena. You can't just claim equity. That wasn't the deal. Chloe Several, 15 p.m. Tone, rising anger. The general counsel says the clause is valid. How is that possible? Chloe Several, 30 p.m. Tone. I smiled at the sunset. Didn't trick you, honey. At 7 p.m. my doorbell rang. I checked the camera. I opened the door. He handed me a thick envelope delivery for Miss Harrison, from Harrison Logistics Legal Department. Inside was a formal letter from the general counsel, a man named James, who I had known for years. He was a good lawyer, which meant he knew when he was beaten. Preliminary review confirms the validity of the executed agreement dated August 2021. The board acknowledges your change in status. An emergency board meeting has been scheduled for 9 several a.m. tomorrow via Zoom to discuss the implications of this transfer. Sincerely, James Vance, General Counsel. They had folded. The contract was airtight. If they fought it in court, discovery would reveal that they hadn't read their own executive agreements. The shareholders would sue them into oblivion. Accepting my claim was the only way to keep the dirty laundry indoors. I had gone from terminated employee to major owner in less than 6 hours. Opened my laptop to check the company news. The thread was exploding. User Warehouse Guy 88. Did anyone see Elena leave? User Actant Prob. Something is going down. Chloe has been screaming at legal for 2 hours. User Loy Bear. My boss just told me to freeze all org chart updates. Said the restructuring is on hold. I typed a single reply under a throwaway account I kept for emergencies. User just watching. I closed the laptop. Chloe had spent 6 months trying to push me out because she thought I was old, irrelevant, and powerless. He didn't understand that in our world power comes from the ink on the page. She had handed me the gun, aimed it at her own foot, and pulled the trigger. I slept like a baby. I had a board meeting in the morning, and I wanted to look fresh. You stare at your own reflection, fixing your hair, adjusting your lighting, waiting to be admitted by a host who holds your digital fate in their hands. Several 9 a.m. I was wearing the navy suit. My hair was pulled back in a severe, elegant bun. No distractions. The screen flickered. I entered the meeting. The grid populated. William, chairman, looking like he hadn't slept. James, general counsel, looking defeated. Chloe was in her glass office. Her hair was slightly frazzled, a loose strand hanging by her ear. Her eyes were red. "Good morning," I said. My voice was clear, crisp, and devoid of any emotion. "William, tell her this is fraudulent inducement." She hid that clause. It was in the standard executive protection package approved by the compensation committee. You were on that committee, William. I recall the package. I didn't realize it applied to interim roles. But we aren't here to debate the contract. James has already validated it. "There is no agenda," Chloe shouted. "We are here to negotiate your buyout." I leaned forward slightly. "I'm afraid that's not how this works, Chloe. I'm a partner, and partners have rights." I picked up a document from my table for Article 9, Section 4 of the corporate bylaws. The room went silent. Even Chloe stopped breathing for a second. I continued. "You terminated a protected class employee without reviewing her contract, triggering a massive equity dilution event. You cost the existing shareholders, including the family trust, 10% of their value in a single afternoon because you didn't want to read a PDF. You can't do this," Chloe whispered. "I am formally calling for a leadership review and a motion to remove the chief operating officer, pending an investigation into competence and breach of fiduciary duty." "Second," said a voice. Chloe whipped her head around to look at her screen. Betrayal written all over her face. "I work for the board, Chloe," James said, his face grim. "You triggered a poison pill because you were careless. We can't have that kind of risk at the helm," Chloe shrieked. "I am the future or liability," I said softly. William looked at Chloe, then at me. He looked at the woman who was tanking the company with buzzwords and the woman who had quietly kept it afloat for decades. "We have a motion in a second," William said, his voice heavy. "All in favor of placing Chloe Harrison on administrative leave pending review." James raised his hand. The 3 other directors raised their hands. Chloe's mouth fell open. She looked around her glass office, realizing that the transparency she loved so much meant everyone outside could see her falling apart. "You're fired, Chloe. I didn't say it. The silence said it for me. I'm disconnecting." She fumbled for the mouse. Video cut to black. My heart was steady. Now, I said to the remaining stunned faces, let's talk about that logistics app. Chloe wasn't just put on leave. She was effectively erased from the decision-making loop. If me carte blanche to stabilize operations, I didn't take my old office back. I didn't need it. Walking back into the building was surreal. The security guard, Mr. and Mrs. Harrison, I thought. I'm back, Mr. Consultant Basis, owner privileges. I winked at him. The doors opened. The atmosphere was different. They knew Chloe was out. They knew I was back. I spent the first week undoing the damage. First, I killed the brake tracking app. Effective immediately, the mandatory time tracking pilot is canceled. We trust you to do your jobs. Heard later that the foreman, Hank, actually printed the email and taped it to the break room fridge. Next, I met with the external consultants Chloe had hired. So Elena, one of them said, we're worried about the velocity of the synergy if we pause the rollout. I'm worried about the velocity of your invoices, I replied. Your contract has a 30-day termination clause. Have until Friday to hand over your deliverables and clear out. You can't just I own 10% of the company and I have the proxy votes of the board, I said, leaning back. Goodbye. It wasn't revenge. It was scrubbing the graffiti off historic building. Chloe, meanwhile, was fighting for her life in the background. She threatened to sue the company for wrongful suspension. I let her. She wasn't a leader. She was a panicked amateur. James, the general counsel, brought the file to my temporary office. Elena, he said, looking uncomfortable. Chloe had been charging consulting fees to a shell company registered to her brother. It wasn't a huge amount of money in the grand scheme of things, maybe $50,000, but it was fraud. That's cause. James nodded. Draft the termination letter, I said. For real this time. No equity. Just a lawsuit if she doesn't go quietly. Elena, James said softly. Are you sure? I saw the fleet moving. I saw the business Richard built. She's just a bad investment now. Cut the cord. Chloe wasn't just losing her job, she was losing her reputation. Felt a strange sense of peace. I hadn't destroyed her. She destroyed herself. The day Chloe cleared out her glass office, the blinds were drawn. I was in the break room making tea, not the battery acid coffee, but my own blend I brought from home when she came out. She was carrying a box. The stilettos were gone, replaced by sensible flats. The arrogance had been sand-blasted off, leaving something brittle and sharp beneath. She stopped. For a moment, I thought she was going to scream, but she didn't. She just stared, her eyes full of hate and confusion. You had that contract ready for years. You were just waiting for me to slip up. It was warm, soothing. I didn't plan for you, Chloe. Plan for anyone who tried to hurt this company. You just happened to be the one who walked into the trap. It was never your company, I corrected her. Richard would be ashamed of you, she said, her voice shaking. Doing this to family. I set my mug down. I walked over to her until I was standing right in her personal space. Richard, I said, my voice low and dangerous, would have fired you 6 months ago for the way you talked to the drivers. You respected the title. Don't you ever speak for him again? She clutched her box tighter. Good luck, Chloe. I hear there's an opening for a receptionist at the gym. Might be a better fit. He took the elevator down and she was gone. The office felt lighter. William found me later that afternoon, so he said, leaning against my doorframe, Chloe is gone. Well, we were wondering. No, I said, smiling. I don't want to run the day-to-day. I've done my time in the trenches. I want to stay on the board, I said. I want to chair the ethics committee. Someone who knows the difference between a pallet and a skid. Done. Every share. Good. I know. I said that evening I went to the cemetery. It was a beautiful evening. The sky turning purple and gold. I fixed it. The app is gone, and I own 10% of the whole damn thing. I poured a little bit of the Pinot Noir onto the grass, always read the fine print. I drove home with the windows down. I wasn't the grieving widow anymore. I was Elena Harrison, shareholder, and nobody was ever going to put me in a gray box.